Let me tell you about Georgy Ivanov, or as most folks in the villages called him, simply Gorski. A quiet man, kind-eyed and broad-shouldered, always with a weather-worn pack on his back and his green ranger's coat buttoned to the collar. He'd worked for the Balkan National Park for over 15 years, patrolling the Stara Planina mountains through rain, snow, and blistering heat. He was the kind of man who would carry a wounded fox down a ridge to safety, or leave an apple at a shrine when passing through an old part of the forest. He didn't do it for superstition, just respect. But the forest has its own laws, and sometimes it sends someone to see if a man is truly good. It was in late autumn when the mists began rolling early through the ravines and the forest turned the color of rust. Gorski was assigned a 3-day patrol, moving through the deep ridgeline beyond where tourists ever went. He carried his tent, a bit of food, his old hunting knife, and the trust he had in the mountain. The first day passed peacefully. He crossed bear tracks near Rajsko Praskalo waterfall, or Heaven's Sprinkler in English. He saw a herd of deer move through the birches like ghosts, and even paused at the wooden cross hammered into a tree. No name on it, just a small clump of dry flowers. By nightfall, he set up camp near a clearing surrounded by tall pines. The wind whispered strange things through them, but Gorski had spent enough nights out there not to worry. Until he saw the smoke. Not his fire, another, just a few dozen meters deeper into the forest, thin and curling like a thread through the trees. He stood, listened, nothing but wind and the faint crackle of burning wood. Grabbing his flashlight, he made his way toward it. He found a small fire in the middle of the clearing, and beside it sat an old man. Long white beard, hunched shoulders wrapped in what looked like a shepherd's cloak. His skin was like bark, wrinkled and sun-darkened. He looked up at Gorski and smiled with too many teeth. "Evening, Ranger," the old man said in a gravely voice. "Mountain's been watching you." Gorski frowned slightly. "You alright out here, Dado? You're far from any trail." The man nodded. Far from many things, but not from the truth. Gorski's grip tightened slightly on the flashlight. "Do I know you?" "You do now." The man patted the log beside him. "Sit, rest. The path ahead will not be easy." Gorski didn't sit, but he stayed. Something about the man, his stillness, his words, made it feel like leaving would be disrespectful, or dangerous even. "I've been walking this mountain my whole life," Gorski said cautiously. "I know the trails." "But do the trails know you?" the old man asked, suddenly serious. "What do you mean?" "Only those of good heart walk the mountain with her blessing. Others, they lose their way. Sometimes they are never found." That's when Gorski's chest tightened. He remembered the old tales. From his childhood in Veliko Trnovo, his grandmother had warned him, "If you meet a quiet old man in the woods, don't lie to him, don't try to trick him. It might be the lesnik, the forest's judge." "I help keep this land safe," Gorski said slowly, meeting the old man's eyes. "I don't steal, I don't cut trees I shouldn't. I've buried animals hid by poachers with my own hands. If I have done wrong, I've tried to make it right." The old man stared into the fire. For a long moment, he said nothing. The pines swayed above them. Then he reached into a pouch at his side and took out a handful of dried leaves. He blew on them softly, and they glowed blue for just a second before the wind carried them away. "You speak true," he said finally. "You may walk safely. Gorski blinked. The old man stood, slowly, creaking like an ancient tree. Follow the river fork at dawn. It will lead you to where you need to go. Do not turn left and do not look back. Before Gorski could ask another question, the old man turned and stepped into the trees. But there were no footsteps and no sound. He was just gone. The next morning, mist clung thick to the ground. Gorski stuck camp and, remembering the old man's words, followed the river fork north. At one point, the left path looked easier, wide and recently traveled, but he remembered. Don't turn left. He took the narrower trail, one barely marked, and after several hours emerged safely on the ridge near Botev Peak, just as scheduled. Back in the village, a younger ranger met him with wide eyes. "You came from the Western Gorge?" he asked. "Yes," Gorski said. "That's impossible. There was a rockfall there yesterday. The whole left trail is gone. Buried." Gorski said nothing, just looked at the forest behind him, where the trees shifted silently in the wind. He never told his co-workers what happened, but he still visits that part of the mountain, leaving a bit of honey or bread at the base of a gnarled pine, just in case the Lesnik is watching. Because Gorski knows the truth now, the mountain sees you, and sometimes it sends someone to see who you really are. My name is Ivan Petrov, a forest ranger for many years. I patrol the central part of the Stara Planina mountains with nothing but my backpack, rifle, and routine. If you've ever hiked these paths, you'll know the mountain has a soul. Sometimes you feel it, especially when you're alone, and yet not really alone. Last autumn, I set out on a week-long inspection. Standard route, a few key points, trail markings, checking for poachers. Nothing out of the ordinary. The first days were golden, crisp light, the scent of pine and moss. But by the third day, the wind changed. It smelled like a storm, and not just any storm, the kind that carves itself into your memory. By sundown, thick black clouds had swallowed the peaks. Distant thunder rumbled closer with each minute. Map, compass, GPS all showed that about 5 kilometers ahead there was an old abandoned cabin. I'd heard of it, Hutsmeica, dragon hut in English. No one had stayed there in decades. An old woman in the village of Tuzia once warned me about it. "Don't go in there, boy. A Tawasum lives there, old, wicked, and forgotten by God." I laughed back then, but now, with the wind howling like wolves and the rain coming sideways, superstition had to wait. By 8 in the evening, I reached the hut, perched between low pines and ancient beeches, with a sagging roof but solid walls. The door was ajar. I stepped inside. It reeked of dampness, rot, and something else, something I couldn't place. But outside, lightning cracked the sky in half, so I shut the door, propped it with a stone, and laid out my sleeping bag in a corner. The first odd thing was the silence. Despite the storm outside, it was dead silent inside. The flickering flame of my lantern threw shadows along the walls. That's when I heard it, creaking, then whispering, and laughter, childlike but distorted, like a broken radio. I turned, and where the door should have been securely shut, it was open again. I stepped out with the lantern. No one. No prints in the mud. I came back in, sealed the door as best as I could, and choked it up to wind. I fell asleep quickly, but it didn't last long. I woke to a chill. Something icy was breathing over my face. I opened my eyes and saw 2 red glows above me. Eyes. It was perched on a ceiling beam, a small creature, child-sized but with the face of a crone, its skin dry and dark like old bark, with teeth like iron nails. It grinned. "Who are you to enter my house without knocking?" it whispered. My heart slammed against my chest. Right then I knew this was the Thalassam. I remembered the old woman's words. Thalassams are clever, not strong. They won't overpower you. They will outsmart you. But if you let them, you'll never leave. I stood up slowly and reached into my bag for a piece of dry bread. "Sorry, Grandpa," I said. "Didn't know this was your place. I brought some bread. Maybe we can share?" Its eyes glowed brighter. It slid down from the beam, light as mist, and sat across from me. It took the bread, sniffed it, and smiled. "Not many don't scream or run. I like you. But if you want to leave, you have to answer me." "I'm listening," I said. "What is the heaviest thing that you cannot carry?" I stayed silent. Then I said, "Shame." The Thalassam stared into me. The red faded from its eyes. Then it nodded and vanished like smoke, and the storm wind inside the cabin stopped. By morning, the storm had passed. The door stood open. There were no footprints, only the half-eaten piece of bread remained. I stepped outside and didn't look back. I haven't told many people this story, only you. But you know what's the strangest? Since that night, I always find the path, even in the fog. Birds warn me of snares. I sense when a deer is ill before I even see it. It's like something wants to help me. I'm not sure, but when I sleep out in the forest, I still sometimes hear a soft giggle in the branches. And I always leave a little bread behind, every time. You probably won't believe this story, and honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But I swear on the forest, on the pines and the mountain winds, it happened. My name is Nikolai, and I've been a Gorski, a forest ranger, for more than a decade. I patrol the wide stretch between the central and eastern parts of Stara Planina, thick forests, hidden paths, and places that don't show up on any map. It was in early autumn, during one of my longer assignments. My superior had given me a list of checkpoints, remote areas where poachers had been spotted, illegal logging sites, signs of fire damage. I had a whole week out there, sleeping in whatever shelter I could find, mostly my tent or old foresters' cabins. The first few nights were uneventful, just the usual wind through the trees, owl calls, rustling underbrush. But then came the fourth night, and that's when everything changed. I'd set up a camp in a narrow valley between two ridges. No phone reception, no radio signal. Just me, my pack, and the sounds of the forest. Around midnight, a dense fog rolled in, thicker than I'd ever seen. It came down like a blanket, and even my flashlight barely cut through it. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint at first, but unmistakable. "Nikolai." It came from the trees, maybe 10 meters away. It wasn't the voice of someone I knew. It was strange, distorted, like wind through a broken flute. My first instinct was to reach for my radio. Dead. No surprise. I called out anyway. "Who's there?" Nothing, just the wind, and then again. "Nikolai." Closer, and this time the voice matched mine exactly. My voice, coming from the fog. I stood there frozen, heart thudding. That's when something from my grandmother's stories hit me. She used to tell me about creatures that called your name at night. Forest spirits, evil ones. Yavina. They were said to mimic voices, draw you deeper into the trees until you were hopelessly lost, or worse, dead. Some stories said they could only be defeated with fire and clean water, the two things that held spiritual purity in old Slavic belief. The voice called again, this time from behind me. I spun around and saw a figure in the fog, tall, thin, hair like tangled vines, eyes glowing faintly yellow. Its skin looked stretched, almost tree bark-like, and it smiled with jagged teeth. "You're tired, Nikolai. Come rest." It was stepping closer, slow and deliberate. I backed away and reached for my pack, fumbling for the lighter and the bottle of holy water I always carried, a habit I picked up from my grandmother's quirks. She used to say, "The mountain has all things, carry blessings." Thank God I listened. I lit a dry branch and held the flame toward it. The creature hissed and recoiled, but didn't stop. So I threw the water. It sizzled where it hit, and the Yavina screamed. A real scream, not human, something ancient. It backed into the fog and began to shift, bones snapping, legs twisting backwards like a deer's, head cocking to one side. Its voice changed, now pleading. "Nikolai, please." It was using my mother's voice now. But I didn't hesitate. I held the flame high and shouted, "In the name of fire and water, be gone!" I don't know why I said that, maybe instinct, maybe desperation. The thing shrieked, spun into the fog, and the air around me seemed to crack, like a tension releasing. The fog started to lift. I stood there for what felt like hours, shaking, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. By morning I packed up and left that valley. I hiked almost 20 kilometers without stopping, didn't even eat. When I finally reached one of the ranger stations, I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost, because the younger guy on the shift asked if I was alright. I just said I got turned around in the fog. I didn't tell him about the Yavina. Only the old-timers would have believed me anyway. But listen, if you ever hike that part of Stara Planina and you hear your name in the dark, don't answer. And if you do, may God help you to have fire and clean water with you. You'll need both.